Good afternoon. I am Luis Cassinelli, coordinator of BIOEN, and I will be the host of this webinar. I would like to give welcome to all attendees, our representatives and speakers. The questions could be done in English during the webinar to a Q&A panel by sending your comments and questions to BIOEN-webinars@fapesp.br. The webinar will be recorded, and after the broadcast, it will be available on YouTube. This webinar series will aim to present the most important achievements of the State of São Paulo Foundation Bioenergy Research Program, BIOEN. We also invite participants of the BBEST BioFuture Conference to join us in these webinars. What we will show here and in the next ones forecasted is a teaser of what will be presented at the conference in November, December 2020. We start the BIOEN research webinar today with biomass and sustainability. The next will be about biofuels technologies and end use, followed by biorefineries and bio-based chemicals. And there are much more to come. Let me talk about bioenergy program. BIOEN is the State of São Paulo Foundation Bioenergy Research Program. More details can be found in the site BIOENFAPESP.org. It funds fundamental and applied science in universities, research institutes, small business, and industry partnerships. I would like to introduce Professor Rubens Maciel, Bioenergy Program Coordinator and Professor at University of Campinas. He will be with me as a co-moderator and will be responsible for receive the questions sent by email. Now, Professor Marco Antônio Zago, President of São Paulo State Research Foundation, will open the webinar. Please, Professor Zago.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very glad to participate in this webinar organized by the BIOEN program of FAPESP. And this meeting happens in a very special moment as a global event. As you know, the coronavirus pandemic imposes rapid changes that may become permanent. Changes in the society behavior, profiles of society expenditures, political priorities, and the functioning of the economy. After the end of this period, of this acute period, we may think that the final sum will probably be to accelerate and concentrate in a very short period of time global changes that were already in motion. One of these trends is the substitution of renewable sources of energy for non-renewable sources. And the success of this strategy varies in different countries or regions. For Brazil, the matrix of internal offer of energy has 42% of renewable energy, a record value among countries with very large populations, over 100 million inhabitants. For comparison, the average among the OCDE countries is 10%. The most relevant item among renewable energy sources is energy from sugarcane biomass, in the order of 40% of the total. Other important sources of biomass include biodiesel, biogas, vegetable oils, and residues of the agroeconomies, such as rice husk and others. So, as Professor Cassinelli said, FAPESP established more than 10 years ago a program, a research program in bioenergy, BIOEN, aiming at advancing basic and applied knowledge related to production of bioenergy in the country. And with participation of more than 300 researchers, it is a success and originated more than 1,300 scientific articles and many examples of innovation. Okay, one of the concerns of the researchers and the business executives related to bioenergy production is the protection of the environment. The state of São Paulo is the first world producer of sugarcane, ethanol, and sugar. And the state is responsible, for instance, for 14% of the global production of sugar. But at the same time, the water usage by the sugar energy industry in the state fell 80% since the decade of 1990. The impacts of the program can be observed in many different areas: agriculture, genetics of sugarcane, biotechnology, industrial aspect of alcohol production, bioproducts or high-value chemicals, more efficient vehicles, and public policies. Thus, we at FAPESP are very glad to continue to support the program as long as it continues to produce relevant results. Obviously, times change, and the program needs to adapt to changes in the society. As I made a reference at the beginning, the economic impact of ethanol production is considerably less today than it was 2 decades ago. Although it is still significant, it certainly will be affected by the global fall of oil prices and the progressive finding of huge oil reserves here in Brazil. The 27% mix of ethanol in gasoline and the flex fuel engines have contributed strongly to the reduction or slowing of urban pollution. This remains a valuable argument in favor of the ethanol as source of energy for urban mobility, although the use of electrical vehicles will increase significantly in the near future. But again, biomass may also increase its contribution to electrical energy generation. However, other forms of renewable energy sources will increase their contribution to the energy matrix, even in Brazil. Maybe it is time for the coordinators of the program to rethink about its format and targets and look for more widely to all forms of renewable energy sources. Anyway, I make very clear my congratulations to all the participants of this project for the huge amount of valuable information, new research, and innovation it has produced thus far. I will now ask my colleague at FAPESP, the scientific director, Luiz Eugênio Melo, to take the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Zago. Thank you, Cassinelli, for opening and being the moderator of this session. And thank you for all participating on this event. As mentioned by Professor Zago, biomass and sustainability, it's of course of interest to all of us, and it's not a given that sustainability and the use of bioenergy would be the way to go in the future. And that's, of course, set by economic pressures and changes that are currently taking place. In a sense, it's similar to all of innovations. They are always being challenged by different economic forces or by different and new technologies that may arrive and may take place and substitute a given field of knowledge and economic area. The bioenergy program at FAPESP is clearly a success with over 10 years of existence, over 400 projects having been financed, over 200 small enterprises being financed, and there are many other ways to see its success, and that would go on its capacity as a coordinator of the Brazilian efforts in bioenergy at the UN. And so it's definitely a clear success, but that's not to say that's not being challenged, and that it's not that it does not need to constantly revise its goals and its ambitions in terms of not only generating knowledge that contributes to the development of an area, but also results in the implementation. We all are aware of the early 20th century discussions between Tesla and Edison in which way energy would be best stored and transmitted or transported, one would say, to the consumers. And not always the best solution wins. There is always a strong aspect of how positioned the different players are. For FAPESP is of relevance to support knowledge production and knowledge dissemination, and to this end contribute for the best solutions to eventually prevail. We of course, in the state of São Paulo, do have a strong basis of bioenergy production, and together with that, knowledge production associated to that topic. It's my pleasure to be participating on this event, initially discussing biomass and sustainability, as already mentioned, and I look forward to seeing the development of the program as it evolves for the next 10 years. So with that, I hand back the word to Luis Cassinelli. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to give the floor to Professor Glaucia from University of São Paulo and coordinator of BIOEN Program. Professor Glaucia will give us an overview of the BIOEN program results.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome such a diverse audience to the first BIOEN research webinar. We have here BIOEN researchers, collaborators, representatives from government and industries. I'm here to present in the name of the BIOEN Coordination Committee an overview of BIOEN research in the state of São Paulo. And I would like to start by giving our sincere thanks to Professor Zago and Professor Luis Eugenio for their support of our FAPESP BIOEN activities, and also thank Professor Brito Cruz, who was the creator of BIOEN, and Professor Goldenberg, great experts in bioenergy, working with us for many years now. BIOEN started in 2009. As many of you know, in the beginning, bioenergy was promoted in Brazil for the sake of energy security and economic development. But for more than 10 years now, we have increasingly seen it as an essential component of our energy matrix that must be expanded if we are to avoid climate change and allow for sustainable development. It is the only available option for fossil fuel substitution for a large sector of our economies. We can increase efficiencies. We can use solar, wind, and nuclear. We can use electric cars, but without bioenergy, we are not going to reach our decarbonization targets. There is no country in the world with a population over 60 million people that has an energy matrix with more than 40% renewables. What other countries want, we have. We have some key components that contribute to this achievement. I would say one is our long-standing tradition of producing sugar in the country, but also our capacity to produce hydroelectricity and, importantly, sugarcane ethanol and sugarcane bioelectricity, with increasingly amounts of biodiesel as well. So, and another key component that I must stress is our strong science on this subject. Brazil is the leader in publications in this field. So we are very thankful to the robust community of scientists that have been working in this team for so many years. I'm going to describe some of the innovation. It's just a highlight. Innovation is happening in many fronts. We have projects on 20 areas of knowledge in the BIOEN program. We have a community that is, since the 2000s, working the learning curve of a bioeconomy. Together with in the beginning of the 2000s, we have, this was 2003, the first flex fuel engine developed in Brazil. And in parallel, we had the genomics era, enabling a biotechnological approach for energy crops. Together, this galvanized bioenergy research, and we launched the BIOEN program, starting with the Biomass division. We have now 1,300 publications, 419 projects, 700 students and postdocs, collaboration with 13 large companies and 188 startups. We have collaborators in 34 countries last time I counted. And I would like to stress an important outcome of the BIOEN program was to increase the articulation of researchers in transdisciplinary research, which impacts directly the quality of public policies being generated in this sector. So to finish, I want to highlight some of the main results of the program, we will have an opportunity to bring in experts to next webinars to describe these and some other achievements. But I would like to highlight the genome sequence of a Brazilian commercial cultivar. This is the most complex crop to be sequenced to date. I would like to highlight the increasing engagement of the breeding programs they developed together with the university's statistical genetics for polyploids. Sugarcane has several copies of its genome, and in the beginning we did not have genetics to approach such a complex genome. We now have tools that allows for breeding of new varieties with molecular markers and to advance the full use of biomass for bioproducts. We have breeding programs also releasing disease-free seeds, free of bacteria that plague the culture, with certificate of origin and health, and with improved capacity to make crosses. And we have now super canes. We have canes that are reaching over 200 tons per hectare. In the beginning of the program, we did not have sugarcane transgenics. We now have many labs with capacity to produce transgenics, and also in the industry. And I want to also acknowledge a vast number of groups that are working on the agronomical front. We have digital agriculture, improving planning using Industry 4.0. We have several efforts in improving cloud management systems. We have sensors in the field. We have strategies to decrease costs. We have among the startups, half of them are on the agronomy side, and half of that is biological control, pest and disease control. Many startups on this front, together with artificial intelligence tools, both in the fields and in mills. And to finish, I want to highlight a large cooperation that we had under the BIOEN program. We produced a global assessment of bioenergy sustainability to answer some nagging questions as to, do we have enough land in the world? How much bioenergy can we produce? Can we really decrease emissions with using bioenergy? And we found so much science that could help us produce science-based recommendations for policy. This was a collaboration of scientists from over 30 countries. We have an open access report published on the BIOENFAPESP.org site with 70,000 downloads so far. This has, I'm sure, helped accelerate the transition for a low carbon economy using bioenergy and advanced bioenergy to make it perform better in the nexus of food security, climate and environmental security, sustainable development, and innovation. So I would like to thank all the BIOEN contributors, and Cassinelli, back to you.
Thank you, Glaucia. Now I would like to pass the floor to Professor Stephen Long from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, USA, will talk about improving crop yields for bioenergy strategies and potential. Please, Professor Stephen.
Thank you. So I'm Steve Long from the University of Illinois. Some of you may know that in the US we have 4 bioenergy centers funded by the US Department of Energy. One of those is based at Illinois, and our focus is actually on miscanthus, which you can see behind me, a close relative of sugarcane, sorghum, that's bioenergy sorghum, and sugarcane. And this is through a collaboration with the University of Florida, Brookhaven National Lab and the University of Nebraska as well. My particular role in that is in the process of photosynthesis. Although these crops are some of the most productive in the world, especially sugar. If we actually look at the theoretical efficiency versus what's achieved, we still find that we fall far short of that theoretical efficiency. So the way we approach all this is...
Steve, please.
Sorry?
Okay, your microphone is back.
Okay. You couldn't hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So the way we are looking at improving photosynthesis is from modeling metabolism and gene networks right the way through to canopy structure. And using optimization, we can then try and pick out, okay, where are the bottlenecks in the process? And so, for example, we have picked out 3 steps in metabolism where we're now trying to upregulate the expression of the genes. One of those in our field trials in Florida has resulted in about a 10% improvement. We have another one which we've already tested in maize, which worked well, and we think it should work just as well in sorghum and sugarcane. And so we're testing that. So that's at the level of metabolism. We've also been looking at genes which can alter canopy structure, particularly making the leaves more upright, which of course has been done in breeding, particularly in maize. And we've got that going as a field trial. It worked very well as a field trial with sorghum last year, and we're repeating that again this year. But it looks as though that has allowed us to improve productivity of an elite sorghum line by about 15% without actually using any more water. So we've also gained productivity and water use efficiency simultaneously. So we think there's still considerable prospect to improve the productivity of these crops by genetic manipulation. We've also been looking through natural variation as well, which might be used by breeders too in some of these traits. But we think the big gains will be achieved through genetic manipulation. And of course, realize that Brazil is leading the way in developing material of sugarcane carrying genetic modifications. So I don't think I need my time. How am I able to hear this?
Okay, Steve.
Okay, he is back. Hi, Steve.
Hello? Sorry.
Hello? Yeah, it's okay. Can you talk?
Okay. Yeah, no, that was the end of my presentation. So I'm guessing you can't hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I finished, Luis.
Okay, good. Sorry. Now I would like to give the word for Professor Heitor Cantarella from Agronomic Institute of Campinas and BIOEN Program, and he will talk about the soil component in the search for sustainable biomass yield improvements. Heitor, please go ahead.
Thank you, Cassinelli. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, the subject that I have to talk about is very broad, so I decided to pick up 2 small items to highlight what the support of BIOEN program has done in this area. So I will cite one applied and one basic research in the soil component of biomass production. The applied research is micronutrients, the use of micronutrients. The use of micronutrients in sugarcane fertilization has been neglected for many, many years because we believed that micronutrients were not as important as we know that they are today. But this has changed thanks to research that has been done in the past few years. And now we know, for instance, that we can increase sugarcane yield in several soils by 10 to 20 tons per hectare by just applying fertilizers containing zinc or bore or sometimes molybdenum, for instance. So these new findings have an impact in the biomass production, especially sugarcane production, and this has been translated already into the fertilizer recommendations for the industry. So this is an example of an applied research that has given important contribution to the sector. The other topic that I'd like to briefly talk about is nitrogen. But I'm not going to talk about nitrogen as a nutrient. I'm going to talk about nitrogen as the aspects of sustainability of nitrogen fertilized sugarcane. As you may know, lots of energy is produced, is spent, and greenhouse gases are emitted when fertilizers are produced in the plant and factory. And then when nitrogen is used in the field, again, nitrogen, greenhouse gases are emitted by natural processes that take place in the soil. How important are these emissions associated with nitrogen fertilizer? Very important. Give you some numbers. From the total greenhouse gas emissions associated with the production of ethanol, for instance, 20 to 40 or sometimes more % comes from from the use of nitrogen fertilizer. So nitrogen fertilizer has a huge impact in the sustainability of bioenergy and especially ethanol. Well, a few years ago, there was not one single study to measure in the field the greenhouse gas emission from fertilizer applied sugarcane, not one. Now, after the support of FAPESP, we have several dozens of papers published on the subject, and you know a lot about what went on in the field. So to give you an example, we learned that the nitrous oxide emission when fertilizers are applied to the field, nitrous oxide is one potent greenhouse gas, is 30% less than the IPCC number, 30% less. Well, so what? The IPCC number is used in life cycle analysis around the world to measure the sustainability of bioenergy, ethanol, etc. And we now have the numbers produced in the state of São Paulo showing that in our conditions, the greenhouse gas emissions are 30% lower. And this has consequences. I will give you two examples of consequences of this. First of all, if we are releasing less nitrous oxide emission to produce ethanol, it means that we are releasing less greenhouse gases to produce ethanol. It means that our ethanol, the ethanol produced in Brazil, which is very sustainable, is even more sustainable if we consider the local data of greenhouse gas emission compared to the IPCC default values. So the consequences of these findings are very important for the industry because we can show that we have a much better, still better ethanol in terms of sustainability in Brazil. And there's another important consequence of this, which is economic. As we ethanol producers will earn decarbonization credit as they decrease the greenhouse gas emission. If we use local data instead of the IPCC data, the ethanol producers will earn more decarbonization certificates and therefore more money. So these are two examples of how science, one example of applied science or of basic science, can have consequences for the bioenergy industry in the state of São Paulo. So with this, I end my presentation and pass on the floor to Glaucia. Thank you.
Okay, my intention here is to acknowledge the grand effort of the state of São Paulo Sugarcane Genomics community that dedicated more than 10 years to the deciphering of the sugarcane genome sequence. It all started under the BIOEN program. It was one of the first challenges that we decided to undertake. We organized in 2009 a workshop at FAPESP with the top experts in sugarcane genomics and breeding and genetics from Brazil, US, France, Australia, China, and South Africa, and it started a collaboration to define a strategy. Why is this such a big achievement? Well, sugarcane has a giant genome. It's got more than 100 chromosomes. It's got many copies of each chromosomes. For reference, humans have 2 copies of each chromosome, one from the mother and one from the father. Sugarcane has around 10 copies. And the genetics of Mendel, of the peas, do not fit to a genome where you can have from 1 to 13 copies of each gene. And each sugarcane has a different genome. We did not have a statistical model for assembly, for error. We did not have computational power to assemble. We had 43,000 genes identified previously in the SUCEST project, but those were all collapsed. All the copies were collapsed into one contig. So when I presented all this challenge, Microsoft Research decided it was a great challenge for them as well. They offered statistical experts, machine, computational power, and to develop an algorithm. And then we were able to separate the copies. So now we have 373,000 genes. We had to re-annotate the SUCEST database. We have a new database available publicly, sucestifund.org. We identified gene promoters that we did not have before. We know now how to tackle when the genes, how much of the genes and where the genes are expressed. We saw that the genes within the coding regions were 99.9% identical. We could separate them because we had longer contexts and differences in the promoters. And now we can know, we can see which copies come from which sugarcane ancestor, because sugarcane does not exist in nature. It was made by man crossing different species. So it's a very odd crop, but very productive. We can now see how we were working in the dark before. And we are now trying to develop sugarcane that can be even higher yield, even more carbon sequestering and tolerant to drought conditions. We are developing a genomics platform to engineer this crop, to make transgenics and use a systems and synthetic biology approach. We have many collaborators across Brazil in several states to develop this future climate resilience project. We know that this is very necessary because climate change is predicting stronger drought seasons. This is decreasing yields in the southeast of Brazil by 15%. And we know now under the RenovaBio legislation that we really need to increase further the yields to increase capacity of sugarcane to reduce emissions. We have now the tools to try to really engage in this next challenge. I'd like to finish by thanking all the BIOEN genomicists, breeders, bioinformaticians that were curious and crazy enough 10 years ago to decide to sequence the sugarcane genome and say that it was a very productive effort. We are putting it to good use around the world. Thank you all. Back to you, Cassinelli.
Okay, Glaucia, thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Renato Godinho, BioFuture Platform, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MRE, that will talk about BioFuture platforms, countries' unity to expand sustainably biomass and bioenergy production for climate change efforts. Please, Renato, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Professor. I'm here to briefly talk to you about the role of the BioFuture platform in promoting sustainability and the sustainable deployment of bioenergy and the low carbon bioeconomy in general. But first, briefly, let me remind you of the important role. So this has been already touched on by a few speakers, but the important role of bioenergy in the world energy matrix in general. So we tend to give perhaps too much attention to renewables, the new renewables such as wind and solar power. But if you look beyond just the power sector and you take the whole energy matrix of the world, according to data by the International Energy Agency, modern bioenergy is responsible for about the same amount of energy that all of the other forms of renewable energy put together. So you add up hydropower, wind power, solar PV, thermal solar, and other renewables, all of them together are about the same final energy consumption in the world of modern bioenergy. So it is by far the leading source of renewable low carbon energy in the world. So this is not much in the power sector around the world, even if in Brazil itself, it is still important even in the power sector, but is the only renewable source that can provide direct heat for housing, for industry, and transport fuels, which is a very important subject here. And so bioenergy among renewables predominates in heat and transport today around the world. So among renewables. So not only it predominates now, but it will also lead the growth. So according to the projections by the IEA, in the next 5 years, the modern bioenergy is set to grow up to 75 million tons of oil equivalent of energy. And this is more leading the growth of solar PV, of wind power, and of hydropower. So it is still not only the largest source, it is still the source that it's increasing the most in the next few years. However, is this enough to set the world on a path to meet the Paris goals for carbon emissions reduction? No, it is far from enough. So bioenergy is playing an essential role in the low carbon development scenarios from all the international agencies that study this subject, IEA, IRENA, and the IPCC. So indeed, by the projections for 2060, they will require 71 exajoules, and this is enormous, of modern bioenergy globally. So today, modern bioenergy provides 18 exajoules, and we will need 71 exajoules in about 40 years. So there is a very important role then for bioenergy to play if the world wants to be in the sustainable development scenario where the emissions are kept under the 2-degree of temperature growth. So bioenergy has to double until 2030, and it has to triple in the transport sector. So there is a lot to be done, and it can only be done, this acceleration, by means of taking all the pathways that we have, and especially with a lot of research. So I'm very pleased here to be here and listening to the advances in research for increased productivity, increased sustainability, increased emissions reductions power, because this is what will take to carry on the low carbon bioeconomy to the level it needs to be for the world. So when this is where the BioFuture platform came in. So in November 2016, at the margins of COP22 in Marrakesh, 20 countries realizing some of the numbers that I have just put up to you, they got together and formed this coalition called the BioFuture platform to promote collaboration and dialogue among them for the actions help lead to this result. So 20 countries does not seem much, but among them are the most, some of the most representative countries in the world in terms of economy, of emissions, of bioenergy potential for consumption or markets, and many factors. So among the countries, I won't cite the 20 now, but beyond Brazil, there is also Argentina, there, Canada, the United States, Italy, Philippines, China, India, Uruguay, Mozambique, and others. So it's a very diverse group of countries, but also a very representative one. And since 2000, the BioFuture platform has worked on a number of products, deliverables, initiatives. I would invite you to check the BioFuture platform website at www.biofutureplatform.org. So you can see there, for instance, the vision declaration that sets the countries on a vision that aiming for a low carbon bioeconomy to be sustainably deployed and accelerated in the next years. You can also get there the creating the BioFuture report. So it was a major report published in 2018, by the end of 2018. With a survey of what is happening in the several areas of the bioeconomy in the 20 BioFuture countries, and also the Mission Innovation countries is another initiative dedicated to research in biofuels. It did on the research get that, for instance, one of the findings is about the barriers. So why doesn't the bioeconomy can develop faster commercially? So the countries found that the lack of finance, unfavorable policy frameworks, limited feedstock supply, which is not so applicable in Brazil, but it's certainly an important factor in other countries, and unfavorable competitivity with fossil fuel products. There are 4 barriers to faster growth and investments. So one lesson that was taken from this is that this sector needs to be at this point policy driven. So we need a comprehensive set of policies to enable a sustainable bioeconomy scale up. So this complete package creates an enabling environment so that the technology can fit in place, the competitive valley of death can be overcome, regulations can be put in place that accommodate, finance can find products that are suitable to the specific needs of bioenergy. They are very different from other renewable energy markets in the power sector, for instance. So isolated measures are not enough. So in Brazil, for instance, the BIOEN Program, I think most of you already have heard about it, is a leading example of the kind of policy that is needed to support the bioeconomy. Although alone, it won't solve all the problems. We need more technology push policies and support. So FAPESP is a key actor in providing that through the BIOEN program and incentivizing research in this field. We also need sustainability measurements and governments that has a large degree of consensus around the world, strong financial instruments and others. So the BioFuture platform now, to start to conclude my presentation, is working with many actors around the world in organizations such as the IEA, IRENA, the Renewable Energy Agency, GBEP, the Global Bioenergy Partnership that is working on sustainability principles, FAO, Agricultural Biomass Practices, IEA Bioenergy, which is a scientific and technological collaboration program that stems back to the 80s, and also private sector associations. So the BioFuture platform stands as a way to the several stakeholders to work together and try to build a concerted effort to create these common goods. What are those common goods? So a common set of policy guidance. So every country has its own reality and will need to adapt the specific measures to be taken, but still there can be guidance appropriate to the different steps and situations that countries are. And the BioFuture platform is working on getting at this side more deeply in the form of what is to be called the BioFuture Policy Blueprint. It's in the works. So we also need a working sustainability approach. So there is a raging debate around the world on what is sustainable. What does it take to be sustainable or not? So what could be the factors? What should be measured and to what extent? And how can we do it in a workable way that does not discourage investment? So this is another line of work that is taking place with partnership with the IEA Bioenergy and GBEP, among others, and also reinforced technical and technological cooperation. So these are some of the important things that we are working on in the BioFuture platform in the countries. Brazil is the current president or chair of the BioFuture platform for a period of 2 years. And as so, we have partnered with FAPESP and the BIOEN program to hold the BioFuture Summit, the second edition. So the first was held very successfully in São Paulo, 2017. And we wanted now to do the second edition, this time in conjunction with BBEST, which is known and loved by many of you, has already a long tradition of being a top science conference for bioenergy. And now we have decided to merge it with the BioFuture Summit so that the joint conference becomes stronger, both in research, but also in policy debate, in the international reach and scale. So we were very disappointed, of course, by the pandemic situation that led us to postpone the BioFuture Summit and BBEST. But we are looking forward to receive all of you in São Paulo if you can register for the conference in November. And also in the meantime, produce a few virtual or online seminars and events that will start get the ball rolling and produce some preliminary debates leading up to that big conference. So thank you very much, and I look forward to continue debate here if there are questions. Thank
you. Now I would like to pass the floor to Marcelo Morandi from Brazilian Agriculture Research Corporation, Embrapa, Environment, Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Food Supply. He talked about the science of RenovaBio, how Brazil is innovating and investing in the low carbon economy. Please, Marcelo, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to participate here in this first BIOEN webinar. and brings some insights on the science behind the RenovaBio, that is the Brazilian biofuels policy, and try to discuss a little bit on how Brazil is innovating and investing on low carbon economy, especially on agriculture and the energy. RenovaBio is a market-driven incentive mechanism. It's based on economic theory of cost market. So it's like to pricing externalities of a product, in this case of biofuels. So it transferred the cost, the social and environmental cost of using fossil fuels as an income to the production of biofuels. So this policy, it values the service of the GHG withdrawal from the atmosphere made by the biofuels. So this mechanism brings incentives to the sustained expansion of biofuels based on efficiency. So RenovaBio creates like a carbon credit per unit of energy, increasing efficiency in the production of biofuels. And this is certified process individually by a biofuels producer. So this policy creates an integrative agenda with the Brazilian automotive industry, like the ethanol electrification, and the petroleum, the oil industry, so you can have a smooth transition on transportation and energetic matrix in Brazil. It's used this policy uses the great potential of the energy production for biomass in Brazil, as told before by Glaucia and some others. So especially sugarcane, corn, soybeans, and different kinds of residues like beef cattle tallow. And it's allow the integration use of these different biofuels like ethanol, biodiesel, biomethane in the Brazilian transportation matrix. And we already have huge infrastructure like filling stations all around the country, and the technology like the flex fuel engines, for example, for a plug and play use of these biofuels. So this can promote this transition very efficiently. But what is the science behind RenovaBio? What is the metric used to make this expansion of biofuels sustainable and to promote the reduction of GHG emissions? So this was developed by a multidisciplinary group of scientists, including specialists on agricultural production system, geoprocessing, modeling for land use change, modeling for biofuel production process, and life cycle assessment. So this multidisciplinary group developed this central component of the RenovaBio, that is the methodology for the calculations of the carbon intensity of these biofuels. So the central principle of the RenovaBio is the calculation of what we call the energetic environmental biofuel index. This grade or this index is the difference in emission given in grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule of the fuel between the fossil fuel and the substitute biofuel through a life cycle assessment from well to wheel approach. This is very important. And to make this calculation operational, we developed the RenovaCalc, that it's a scientifically robust tool, but it's yet easy to use. And this calculator has sensitivity to distinguish GHG emission in biofuels production life cycle from each production unit. So in resume, RenovaCalc is like a customized LCA life cycle assessment based tool developed to run calculations to support the certification of the RenovaBio scheme. We did some methodological decisions and assumptions when we create this framework. So the RenovaCalcs framework is based on a well-to-wheels attributional life cycle assessment approach. It uses energy allocation criteria for co-products. And the calculator is prepared for calculation for different kinds of biofuels, including sugarcane and corn ethanol, biodiesel from different types of oils and residues, biomethane, and biojet fuel. The background data, like the carbon profiles of inputs, like fertilizers, electricity, and so on, comes from EcoInvent database. That it's a very important international database for life cycle inventories. And we have Brazilian inventories that we prepared and deposited on this database. So you are using Brazilian inventories for some instance, and some other background inventories from the database EcoInvent. The emission and characterization factors for emission, we are using from IPCC. We know the limitations of the IPCC factors, like Heitor Cantarella just told about. We are now working to improve these factors for Brazilian conditions, but in this first moment, we are using the IPCC factors, so you can have international acceptance of this mechanism. So the RenovaCalc is designed to account the GHG emissions across the entire biofuel life cycle, and it generates biofuel carbon intensity that it's subtracted from the fossil fuel carbon intensity and generates so our energetic environmental biofuel index, that our grade, and this grade, this index, reflect the individual contribution of each biofuel production agent vis-a-vis the mitigation of a specific amount of greenhouse gas in relation to its fossil, substitute fossil. This in terms of tons of CO2 equivalent. And to convert this grade, this energetic environmental biofuel index, that is giving grams of CO2 per megajoule of the fuel into a decarbonization credit, that is the CBIO, that is given in tons of CO2 equivalent avoided. This grade, this energetic index, is multiplied by the eligible volume of the biofuel. Here is another very important concept of this policy, the eligible volume. The eligibility criteria are requirements that links the biomass production to the sustainable land use through land use change risk management mechanisms. So it includes no native vegetation suppression, so it's zero deforestation in biomass production. It comply, the biomass producer must comply local environmental legislation, like in Brazil, the Farm Environment Registration CAR for the Brazilian people, and must comply agroecological zoning if it's applicable to each situation, to each biomass. So to conclude, the biofuel decarbonization credit, CBIO, it's a financial product backed by CO2 emissions that it's traded on the stock exchange and issued by the biofuel producer based on the commercialization of their certified production. So the fossil fuel distributor must meet a national target of emission reduction. This national emission target is annually individualized for each fossil fuel distribution. And so the fossil fuel distribution must buy these credits, must demonstrate the required amount of CBIOs on their property to meet our target. Other agents like individuals or companies will be able to buy and sell this credit too, because it's a credit that it's commercialized on stock exchange. So this it's a way to bring more liquidity to this market in the green bond abroad. So it is a green economy roadmap for transportation transition to a low carbon economy that is fully adequate for the reality and the conditions of Brazil. So it's a powerful tool and mechanism. And we expect that this can stimulate competition and encourage the more efficiency, taking a life cycle management approach. In the producers use this approach of life cycle to understand how they can do more efficient production of these biofuels. So we really think that research and innovation in this new technology development and improvement for machinery efficiency, chemicals, fertilizers, and so on, will really be successful with the renewable implementation. So I think this is the initial consideration. I would like to thank you and give you the words back.
Okay, thank you. Now I would like to pass the word for Professor Luis Horta from University of Campinas and BIOEN Program. And Luis Horta will talk about emerging markets potential of pastureland use in Latin America and Africa. Please, Professor Horta, go ahead.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Luis, for introducing me. It is really a pleasure to have this big and qualified audience in our first BIOEN webinar. I will close this series of presentations, present you some briefing on the perspectives of increasing the biofuel production in other countries, mainly in Latin American, African countries. Why we should do that? First, because as the previous speakers told us, it's very important to foster bioenergy in the current energy transition. Renato Godinho said it is the leading source of energy. It is true. It's the most important source of energy. Although the wind and solar are very presented as the modern source of energy, but bioenergy, the sustainable bioenergy, can play a more important role instead. The other fossil fuels and directly affect the GHG emission, and more than these, promote socioeconomic benefits and improve income and jobs generation. So we have many reasons to push bioenergy, but where we should do that? Remember that biomass, the feedstock for bioenergy production, represents, in the case of biofuels, more or less 3/4 of the cost. And it's very important to produce biomass efficiently, to have cheap price, to have good conditions. So it means to use low amount of inputs, low amount of land, and these conditions occurs exactly in the intertropical zone on the globe, in the wet tropical countries, where we have good climate and we have also land available. And although many people uninformed said, oh, you have difficulties to expand bioenergy production, it's not true. Very detailed evaluation, including FAO, which is the UN agency responsible for exactly this kind of studies, show that we have a large room for increase biofuel and bioenergy production. So it's interesting to evaluate that, and it is exactly what BIOEN in some studies are pushing, trying to show more and reinforce the database on energy, bioenergy production in these Latin America and African countries. I want to show you some data on the results of these studies. It's interesting to know that today, most Latin American countries are using ethanol blends and biodiesel blends. And we could expand even more for other countries. It's a kind of paradox that some countries are producing biofuels, exporting biofuels, and they're not using yet, and are importing 100% of their needs of fuels. So I will show you some data about that. First, in the case of countries that are already producing sugarcane for producing sugar, as you know, sugarcane is planted in 180 countries over the world. And in many countries, they are just producing sugar, and a byproduct of sugar production, molasses, are not fully used for other applications, and it could be done producing ethanol. To give you an example, countries as Nicaragua and Guatemala could replace more than 20% of their demand of gasoline with domestically produced ethanol using just the available molasses that they have already now. So it's very, I would say, very rapid and simple to introduce biofuels in these countries where already exists a sugarcane industry. I haven't commented about sugarcane because, as you know, sugarcane is one of the most efficient solar energy converter in chemical energy, and so in biofuels. But not just in these countries where you have already in place sugarcane industry operating. We evaluated also the use of a very small fraction of the pasture land in 25 countries, 15 countries in Latin America and 10 countries in Africa. To give you an idea, but let's use just 1% of the pasture lands. Remember that in our country, in Brazil, we increase a lot the beef production, multiplying by 3 our cattle herd, our number of heads of cattle, using the same area of pasture. I'm talking about 108 million hectares. And using good management, better forage, better procedures, improving, applying technology, is possible to use better the land. So consider to use just 1% is very, very conservative, very cautious. And in this case, we are able to open 5 million hectares in those 25 countries. So considering, again, conservative yields of sugarcane, we are able to produce about 4 500 tons, for 450 million tons of sugarcane, which means 35 billion liters of ethanol, which could mitigate 50 million tons of CO2 per year. So I think they are impressive numbers that we could get for implementing properly sustainable bioenergy in these lands where we have good climate and free land. Why we are not doing that? That is the next question. No, we need, as Renato Godinho says, we need good policy. We need mandates. We need to push these, clarify these questions. And I think that BIOEN is clearly going towards to enforce the arguments to push us the proper way. Just a kind of propaganda. Here you have a book. I don't know, you can see a book on this. It's a summary of this work on LACAF we did and with a group of Brazilian universities and universities from other countries collaborating to understand how much and how to push this. I think that is my first remarks on that. Thank you. Luis Cancinelli, is yours, the floor. Thanks.
Thank you, Luis Horta. Now is open the Q&A section. Speakers can make questions among themselves, and audience can submit their questions through the email bioen-webinars@fapesp.br. Please. We are waiting the questions to the email mentioned before.
Okay, I would like to thank you, all the speakers, for this very nice and broad speaking terms of several very quite important topics. And I have some questions to the audience. We have several questions that are coming here. And then I would like to do the first question to maybe Horta or Renato Godinho or even Heitor. The question is if it's possible to, it's feasible to consider increase the carbon content in the agricultural soil for the best agricultural practice, and then account for the CBIOS with the Renova Bio program. Marcel is also open to answer, please.
I don't think so. Soil is a very important body to store carbon, and many of our agricultural practices, especially in sugarcane, when we stop burning, we show that we increase carbon storage in the soil, which is good to decrease greenhouse gas emission. However, in most of these schemes, the carbon stored in the soil are hardly accounted. For one reason, if you change the soil management, for instance, by increasing the plowing of the soil, most of this carbon that has been stored as organic matter will be mineralized and go off again to the atmosphere. Perhaps Marcelo can add something since he's working on Renova Calc.
Yes, at this moment, this is not feasible on the Renova Calc, exactly as the reason that Heitor stressed here. But there are some mechanisms in the Renova Bio law that stress the importance of the possibility to have a bonus for negative emissions, like for sequestration of carbon. So we are working on some possibilities to include some non-label carbon sequestration in the calculation of the RenovaBio. So like biochar or some other BACs solution for recuperation of CO2 in the industry and fixation of this CO2. But in fact, the actual version of the RenovaCalc and the first phase of the program is not possible to account, but we are trying to work that. So it's a good research area for the next 5 or 10 years to try to find a way to calculate it and to account this.
Okay, thanks very much for. Yeah, please.
Yes. I could present a different perspective. I appreciate my colleagues, but I think that in some points we need more study, as just Marcelo comment. To give you some questions, depends on what the land we are using. We have some studies, some interesting studies for Professor Serri, for instance, and others. But I believe that the two main consequences of RenovaBio is to reinforce the productive process but reinforce a lot the amount of data. We have now a big data on the process, on the characteristics, and as Marcelo said also, you are using the IPCC data, but we could improve the information about the carbon content in soil in different layers, in different conditions, different locations. And in the case of forestry, it's a clear effect because it depends on the root deeper in the case. But maybe, I think it's too early to say that it's not having too many advantage in this moment. I think it deserves a good evaluation, more evaluation.
Yeah, you are right. It's a very important way of storing carbon. But the problem is that most of the schemes in the world do not accept that because this carbon is it can be mineralized back again. So there's no guarantee that it will stay there for a long time.
Other aspect similar to that is the cost of the calcário. What means calcário in English?
Limestone.
Lime. Yes, I remember that the IPCC numbers for lime is quite high in terms of emission, and the Brazilian are very different. We have better conditions. So I think with the time, with the more data are available, we could move towards our numbers because they will be really believable.
Yeah, you are right, Otto. And we are doing that. So I think Heitor it's knowing about that. You are doing like a big revision for the all data available for emission factors in Brazil to try to make meta-analysis and try to find good numbers for Brazil and try to publish that and put that on international base so you can use and improve our calculations.
Okay, so thanks very much for the question. This was made by Jamie Fegerutz, and then I will connect two questions in just one. Professor Rafael Otto from USP, Professor for Soil and Fertility in the Fertilizer. He asked the question, how can we have the scientific progress of the BIOEN program closer to the production side? That means can you connect the scientific development towards to increase the sugarcane productivity? So it is open for everybody. Klaus would like to comment on that?
Well, I may try to answer Otto's question. Of course, we do basic and applied research, and sometimes the basic research will take a longer time to reach the productive sector, the farmer. But we have lots of applied research also at BIOEN. And I think the industry community are welcome to approach BIOEN and propose questions or propose areas of study, because we have now a large scientific community that can tackle many of these questions. But I give an example of research that was funded by FAPESP that had a immediate use, which was the case of the micronutrient, for instance. But there are many others. But I think Otto is right. We have to address more practical problems besides the high basic science that we tend to do at these programs.
Good. So I have a quite interesting question now that is regarding to the impact of COVID-19 on the bioenergy sector, biofuel sector, biorefinery, all bio-based sectors. Let me put the following questions. This was made by Johnny Soares, one PhD student at Agriculture School at Unicamp, reflecting that most of the several countries have seen a decrease in the pollution due to decrease of use of fossil fuels. That's the first point. That's going to impact positively the use of biofuels. And then I will add something for your thinking. But the price of oil is falling down. That may be attractive to people to still using oil. So I would like to hear from this audience, from the speakers, how can you use this moment to improve much more the use of bio-based products, including bioenergy, in a sustainable way?
It's quite a nice question. I'll just give some insights just for the discussion. But I think that we must start to show to people, the population, the users of energy and fuels, about externalities. So RenovaBio do that. It did not price the fuel, the biofuel. It priced the externality of this fuel. It's like the reduction of emissions on the life cycle, the reduction of pollutants in the city, and the increase of technology and efficiency on production. So we must start to value these externalities, and to it's like it's coming now for the green investments. People are looking to invest in green technologies, in technologies that have some externalities for the beyond the product in sí. So it's just some insights to halt the discussion.
If I can add something from the BioFuture platform side, this is a very, very important topic. So thank you for the question. And in the BioFuture platform, there has been a meeting recently of all the 20 countries, along with international organizations. And among the topics was one of the most important ones, precisely along that question. So what to do with the impacts that the pandemic is having on bioenergy. So there is now good news that the fossil fuels are being less used and there is less pollution at this time. So emissions will probably fall, carbon emissions fall, energy related fall 8% for the first time in decades, a fall of this size, but it may be short-lived. and we could go back to normal again. And there is this impact. The lower you get the fossil fuel prices, on one hand, it creates less incentive for new investments in fossil fuels. So in the future, have less supply, and this is good. On the other hand, it makes it more competitive and makes life more difficult for bioenergy and biofuel products. So how you deal with that? So we are considering there, and it's on the final stages of consultations with countries, so it's not public and it can change. But we are discussing a set of 5 principles to put forward to countries, and in case those principles are approved, our intention is to hold an event just for explaining those principles and how countries could put them in practice. But the principles for better recovery post-COVID pandemic in relation to the bioenergy. So among those principles would be, do not use this occasion to retrocede, to go back on programs that are good that you have. So do not push back on programs such as Renova Bio and others, so they are the future. Provide some support in short term for producers who are having a double impact of less demand and lower prices. Take the advantage of the current environment of a low fossil fuel price, maybe to reconsider fossil fuel subsidies. So in Brazil, there are no fossil fuel subsidies of any significance, but around the world, there are countries that still heavily subsidize. It could be a good time to reconsider those subsidies, or even to reconsider taxation. So in Brazil, we have a taxation on fossil fuels. Maybe when prices to consumers are low, this could be reconsidered. Reward sustainability. So as we have just heard from Marcelo, precisely. So reward sustainability, the positive externalities, they should be internalized by policy in the price. And perhaps you have heard the sentence build back better. So many countries are considering building back better. So we are doing economic packages that are post-COVID to help the most damaged sectors, such as the aviation sector. So build back better are a set of 3 Bs. Why not build back better with bio? So you can help them grow and make them fulfill a set of conditions that are related to bioeconomy. So there are examples now in the UK and France, which are very good examples for us to look at. That the economic package being given to the air travel sector, to the airlines, they are conditioned on they committing to a certain percentage of aviation biofuels. So this could be a huge boost to this new advanced industry of aviation biofuels that will need to be ever more important in the future. So just to give you one example.
Okay, thanks very much, Renato. I have one, we have several questions, but I would like to put one more from Jim Macmillan from NREL Laboratory in US. He's thanking for the opportunity and happy to see Brazil putting forward the bioenergy activities. And then the question is, the BioFuture platform is prepared to support demonstration projects in the way that, for instance, Luis Orton mentioned in his studies. And what are comments for the speakers?
Well, thank you also for that question. So I think it's directed to me, I believe. The BioFuture platform doesn't have demonstration programs or support programs itself. So it is a platform for collaboration and exchange among the countries. But it certainly, and paired with mission innovation, certainly supports the kinds of packages and helps countries put together the kinds of packages that would support demonstration projects. So in Brazil, we have had an example beyond demonstration, even for commercial scale, from the National Development Bank, that gave way to the first 2 commercial second-generation ethanol plants, the program called BIOES. And I do know in the US, the Department of Energy is leading the way, providing support for a number of promising technologies in different stages. I do not know precisely how much they are doing in the demonstration stage, but certainly across many stages, they is an example of technology push and grants for many promising technologies in the bioenergy field.
Okay. We have so many questions. One more. How can it's a lawyer that's made the question. In fact, it's quite interesting. It's good to discuss. We have several results from FAPESP, from research project, how the landowners or the big companies are dealing with it. Are they accepting the new practices? They are applying it for the increase the production of sugarcane. And I would like to put together a question with Bonomi that asks what do you think it is important to analyze together all the tech-economical sustainability life cycle aspects of the whole chain production to have a better evaluation of the whole process. So I think with this question can end up the discussion, but I'd like you to hear the opinion of most of the speakers, please.
Can I start?
Please.
Yes, so regarding the question of technology transfer to the sector, it is a mix. We have examples from companies that are adopting quite a lot of new technologies into their processes. We have examples of companies that are using technologies developed under the BIOEN program that were able to decrease 20% of their energy consumption and 20 times less water. We have mills that are running on zero water. They use the water from the plants. You saw Heitor Cantarella also describing this change in the nutrition sector. We have both changes in the production of fertilizers to adopt the new science, and also changes in the machines that were used to fertilize. So it is a mix. I think the Renova Bio program has started to stimulate, to reward the best performance. So if we can continue rewarding sustainability, rewarding more efficiency, rewarding more yields, there will be a shift. So I like to think Renova Bio will complete this cycle, because if we have a rewarding system in place that will reward people that are reducing emissions and being more productive, they will have more financial conditions to stimulate investment in the sector. The other thing that I would like to say is that we have a lot of questions here. I was looking at them on the advanced biofuel side, second generation biofuels, lignocellulosics and new bioproducts. So I'd like to announce the next webinar will be on this theme. We have quite a lot of news on this front, not only on conventional biofuels, but advanced biofuels, many new developments. There will be also a specific webinar on biorefineries and bio-based chemicals. So we are kind of running out of time, but I would like to keep you posted for the next editions of the BIOEN webinar series. There will be more opportunities for us to discuss all these complexities that we live now in the world.
I'd just like to complete it, something about that. I really believe that renewable can be a drive for this development, and for two reasons. One is natural reason for the technological push to reduce emissions and to get efficiency and to get more credits, decarbonization credits. But we have like a side effect of this, is that the producers now are starting to have the life cycle analysis thinking. So they are start to see what they are really using and what they are really producing in the field. So there's no control of these conditions before. So now they are looking for that and try to find where they can go better. If you have no new technologies, but just to see what I can improve as the known technology for the moment. It's really a very important side effect of the first month of Renova. And so in the second month, we have this technology push, new developments, new technology that can go and give more efficiency for the process.
I forgot to answer Bonomi's question. If I may complement quickly, Bonomi, you're completely right. We are starting now a project to evaluate different technologies, doing an integrated techno-economic analysis, life cycle analysis, and exergy analysis. This is a recent project that we're studying. You're welcome to join us, as well as other researchers that may have data that can help us evaluate.
Okay, thanks very much, Glaucio. We have several questions, and then I will forward these questions for the speakers, but I will give you the word back to Luis Cassinelli.
Cassinelli, you are muted.
So, sorry. The first BIOEN webinar is finishing now. For Rubens and for myself, it was a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you all, the audience, the speakers, the FAPESP representatives, and the FAPESP communication team. I would like to remember you that the webinar was recorded, and after the broadcast, it will be available on YouTube. We would like to finish asking you to stay tuned for our next BIOEN webinars and remind you to attend the Brazilian Bioenergy Science and Technology Conference and the 20-country Biofuture Platform Multilateral Initiative Conference. They have joined forces to bring the world's very best in policies, innovation, science, and market outlook in the bioenergy and bioeconomy sectors to Brazil, in a landmark event which will be take place from November the 20th until December the 2nd, 2020, the BBS Biofuture Summit the 2nd. Thank you very much for all.